Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Odyssey Recaps Below the Surface Edition. Just a reminder that if you'd like something shorter, shallower, and sassier, head on over to my Just the Tea recaps. But for now, let's dive in. Today we are recapping chapter or book 8, titled by Emily Wilson as The Songs of a Poet. We last left off with Odysseus having washed up on the island of the Phaeacians, where he quickly made his way to the palace, and there he made supplications to the king and queen, mainly the queen, who have said that they will help him get home with their magical ships, but only after they have a sacrificial feast. So our chapter opens as a new day dawns and the palace awakens. King Alcinous leads Odysseus to the Phaeacian council at the harbor. Meanwhile, Athena, disguised as a royal messenger, walks through the town, telling the Phaeacian men to come to the meeting place to see the new godlike visitor who has washed up on their shores. When the council is assembled, Athena again makes Odysseus appear taller, stronger, and more charming, in the hopes that the Phaeacians will welcome and respect him and want to help him. King Alcinous addresses the gathered crowd, telling them that this man, whose name he does not know, has washed up on their shores and needs help to get home. He says that no visitor has ever been forced to stay on their island, and he calls on them to help return this stranger to his homeland, wherever that may be. He asks for 52 of the best sailors to take a new ship on her maiden voyage and take the foreigner wherever he wishes to go. Before they leave, though, there will be a feast for everyone. The crowd breaks up and the Phaeacians get to work, some preparing the ship for its voyage, some preparing the feast. A blind bard is brought to entertain everyone, which, side note, some scholars think could be a reference to Homer, the supposed creator of the Odyssey, who some sources say was blind. Could just be random, but fun little detail. The palace is filled with people, and the king orders 12 sheep, 8 goats, and 2 cows slaughtered and prepared for the people to eat. Now, another quick note, meat wasn't plentifully available to everyone in real ancient Greece, and in many Greek city-states, regular religious or state-sponsored sacrifices were integral to providing key nutrients and fats to citizens who would not otherwise be able to afford or find meat. It's easy to imagine how wondrous this fantastical island would seem to ancient Greek listeners. To us modern listeners, the ships that can sail as fast as thought might be the part that stands out. But for many ancient Greek listeners, it might have been the plentiful food and generous king that stands out more. Consider what this means for the story. Odysseus has once again landed on a magical island of plenty, with beautiful women being offered for marriage and the promise of a life of wealth, ease, and contentment. And yet he is, without hesitation or thought, turning down paradise for a third time. And if you're wondering why it's third and not second time, we will get there. This is compounded by the hardships that we, the listeners, know are waiting for him at home on Ithaca. And though, of course, Odysseus doesn't know about the hordes of violent and murderous suitors eating away at his kingdom, he also just doesn't know what's waiting for him. He's been gone for 20 years, almost a decade longer than his fellow warriors. We've been told over and over that most wives wouldn't have waited this long for a wayward husband. He only had one son before he left. A son who could easily have perished in childhood, as so many children did. He doesn't know about the suitors, but he does know that all that awaits him at home is uncertainty. And yet he chooses, at every turn, to chase the sliver of hope that he will find his wife, son, and kingdom awaiting him on that distant shore. And so he will turn his back on paradise as many times as it takes, all in the hope that somewhere, somehow, his home is still there, ready to welcome him back. But back to the feasting. Once everyone has eaten their fill, the bard begins to sing. He sings the tales of the people most want to hear, and the current favorites are tales of the heroes at Troy. He chooses to sing of a fight between Odysseus and Achilles, not knowing, of course, that the stranger the feast is honoring is in fact Odysseus himself. And Odysseus cannot help but cry while hearing the bard sing, and try to hide it behind a cloak. King Alcinous, who is seated next to Odysseus, can hear his hidden sobs and quickly interrupts the bard to declare that it's time for an athletic competition, so that when their foreign visitor goes home, he can tell everyone of the power and strength of the Phaeacians. The Phaeacians hold competitions in sprinting, wrestling, jumping, discus hurling, and boxing. Odysseus watches them along with the rest of the feastgoers. After they've all completed their competitions, some of the competitors ask Odysseus if he is any good in any sports. though they do note that he has been broken by suffering and perhaps isn't in the best physical shape. They ask Odysseus if he would care to try any of the sports, despite his obvious disadvantages. Odysseus thinks quickly and tells them that he has suffered too much and only wishes to go home. The wrestling competition winner begins to taunt him, saying that he's clearly the type of captain who just watches others do the work and sits back and counts his ill-gotten gains, which is possibly him accusing Odysseus of being a pirate. Keep in mind, they still have no clue who Odysseus is, and him throwing the possibility of piracy out there could also be seen as not just a challenge athletically, but also a challenge to Odysseus' clear desire for anonymity. Now we get to see some of Odysseus' legendary wits and cunning in action. He quickly responds, scolding the challenger for his crazy arrogance, and saying that the gods do not bless everyone the same, with equal gifts of mind, body, or speech, and says that some men may be weak, but everyone looks to them for their intelligence and eloquence, and then there are other men who look fit and strong, but have no grace in their words. He then goes in for the kill, saying to the challenger, like you look impressive, and a god could not improve your body, but your mind is crippled. He says that he is now angry, and even though pain has crushed me, and I have endured the agonies of war and struggled through the dangers of the sea, he will compete. Odysseus leaps up and grabs a discus, one heavier than any of the others used, and hurls it far further than any of the Phaeacians. A disguised Athena runs out to mark the spot and declares Odysseus the clear winner and says that it's likely no one will ever beat his record. Odysseus turns to the crowd and tells them that he will take them on and beat them in any sport they pick. He says he will compete against anyone who wishes to challenge him, except for Prince Laodamas, who, as a man who challenges those who have welcomed him in a strange land, is worthless and a fool. He spites himself. Very cleverly responding to their challenge, while also maintaining the moral high ground and good guest relations. He goes on saying that he can beat them at any sport men practice, and still, without revealing his identity, says that when he was at Troy, he was the second best mortal archer, though he couldn't compete against the demigods. He says he can throw a spear further than any of them too. The only event he will not compete in is the sprinting, because his legs have lost strength during his time at sea, as he couldn't do his exercise routine. The crowd is silent until the king speaks, praising Odysseus for his fine manners and admonishing the man who challenged him so rudely. The king asks that when Odysseus is home with his wife and children, to tell tales of the Phaeacian skills at sprinting and sailing, and that they love the feast, the lyre, dancing, varied clothes, hot baths, and bed. The king then orders the best dancers to come and perform for Odysseus, so he can tell everyone how excellent they are. This is an example of how an honorable reputation is vitally important in the world of the Odyssey, which helps explain why Athena is so intent on Telemachus going out and bolstering his own reputation and that of his family. But back to the feast, a lyre is brought out for the bard and a dance floor is set up, and the dancers begin to dance a holy dance as the bard sings of Aphrodite and Ares. The bard tells the tale. Aphrodite, the goddess of love, and Ares, the god of war, were having an affair. The sun god Helios sees them together and tells Aphrodite's husband, Hephaestus, the god of metalwork. He heads to his forge and crafts magical chains that are as fine as spider webs, but unbreakable, even by gods. He wraps the chains all around Aphrodite's bed, up the bedposts and on the ceiling, and then heads off to Lemnos. Ares sees him leave and comes in to have sex with Aphrodite. They head to her bedroom, but the second they reach the bed, they are caught up by the magical chains, which trap them in place. Hephaestus returns and calls all the gods to come and witness their affair, and demands the bride price he paid for Aphrodite be returned to him. He says Aphrodite cheats on him because he's disabled, which is not his fault. The goddesses refuse to come, but all the male gods come down and crowd into the room to laugh at the lovers and talk about how much they all want to have sex with Aphrodite. Super gross. Only Poseidon is not laughing, and he begs Hephaestus to let Ares go. Hephaestus doesn't want to, but Poseidon promises to pay Ares' debt if he tries to avoid payment. Hephaestus relents and releases them, and the two lovers immediately fly off to separate islands. Everyone enjoyed hearing the bard sing the tale. Then the Phaeacians show off more of their dancing skills, including doing an athletic dance that involved jumping and throwing a purple ball. Odysseus tells the king that he is very impressed, and it is clear the Phaeacians really are the best dancers. The king is happy to hear this and tells the 12 lords of his palace to each go get a pound of gold and some fine clothes and bring them to the palace as gifts for Odysseus before he leaves. He said that he will also provide gifts and tells the man who rudely challenged Odysseus in the athletic competition that he must also bring a special gift to Odysseus as an apology for his rudeness. Everyone agrees and sends servants to fetch the gifts. The rude challenger gives Odysseus a bronze sword with a silver handle and a scabbard carved of ivory, and a heartfelt apology for his rudeness. Odysseus graciously accepts both the gift and the apology. They all head back to the palace, where the king tells his wife to draw Odysseus a hot bath and give him some more clean clothes, and to pack up all of his gifts for his return home. The queen orders the slaves to bathe Odysseus, and she finds a chest and fills it with his gifts, telling Odysseus to tie it up tight so that no one can rob him on his journey home. The poem says, Odysseus, experienced in loss, took careful note, and then he ties a knot that he learned from the witch Circe, who we'll hear more about a bit later. I love this bit because experienced in loss is such a beautiful way of reminding us what Odysseus has endured and also what he's learned from it. He is changed by what he has been through. He's not a caricature of a hero. He's a man who cries and grieves and suffers for his fame. But he has learned from his experiences, and we have a perfect example of him using something he learned at great pain and expense, the knots from Circe, to safeguard his hopes for the future, the treasure. He is humble and grateful for what he has received, and seems just as delighted by the hot bath as the treasure. The slave girls bathe and oil him, before dressing him in clean clothes and sending him out to the feast. On his way, he encounters the princess Nausicaa, who says goodbye and asks him to remember her because she saved his life on the riverbank. Odysseus thanks her again for the help and says he will pray to her like a god forever for saving him, before leaving to join the king at his feast. As they feast, Odysseus cuts a rich slice of meat from the roast pig and tells a serving boy to take it to the bard and asks him if he would please sing of the Trojan War, specifically the final days of the war. He asks him to sing of the wooden horse and of Odysseus, who came up with the plan to drag the horse inside the gates of the citadel to sack the city. The bard sings. He tells the tale of the sack of Troy, of how the cunning Greeks set fire to their camps and pretended to sail away, how Odysseus had hidden, along with a gang of men, inside a giant wooden horse, how they hid inside and listened as the Trojans discussed what to do with the horse, whether they should simply hurl it off a cliff and smash it on the rocks below, how they eventually dragged it inside to pacify the gods. He says, the town was doomed to ruin when it took that horse, chock full of fighters, bringing death to Trojans. And then he sang of how Odysseus and his men poured from the horse in ambush from the hollow and sacked the city, how they scattered out, destroying every neighborhood. Like Ares, Odysseus and Menelaus rushed to find Deiphobus' house, and there he won at last, through dreadful violence, thanks to Athena. Deiphobus was a prince of Troy, by the way. Now, I just want to make a quick side note. This poem, the Odyssey, takes place after another poem, the Iliad, which describes in detail some of the events of the Trojan War. When I was studying the Iliad at university, my professor said that it is at heart an anti-war text. It doesn't shy away from the horrors and cost of war and leaves the listener to ask if it's worth it. I think we can really see this carried out here. The pain and horrors of the war are clear. The destruction of a city, the burning homes, and destruction of neighborhoods are part of the story, and the bard doesn't gloss over them. Odysseus is likened to Ares, the god of war, and that line, he won at last through dreadful violence, strips bare the cost of that victory. Odysseus ended a war that had stretched on for a decade, but at great cost, something that Menelaus touched on when he spoke to Telemachus in Book 4. When the bard finishes singing, Odysseus is in tears. The description of his tears reads like an episode of PTSD, as well as a continuation of the horrors of war. The bard may have finished singing with the sacking of Troy, but the description of Odysseus' tears carries us past whatever glory may have been given to him in victory, and shows us the horrors left in its wake. The poem reads, Odysseus was melting into tears. His cheeks were wet with weeping, as a woman weeps, as she falls to wrap her arms around her husband, fallen fighting for his home and children. She is watching as he gasps and dies. She shrieks, a clear, high wail, collapsing upon his corpse. The men are right behind. They hit her shoulders with their spears and lead her to slavery, hard labor, and a life of pain. Her face is marked with her despair. In that same desperate way, Odysseus was crying. I'd like you to sit with this image for a moment, as the poem asks us to see Odysseus and the vanquished woman sharing the same face, the same tears, the same grief. After the war is over, the vanquished and the victor are left crying the same tears, consumed by the same grief and pain. The message is clear. War destroys everyone involved. Somehow no one at the feast notices Odysseus' tears except for the king, who is again seated the closest to him and can hear his quiet sobs. This time, the king doesn't cover for him. Instead, he calls on the bard to stop singing, saying that the song is causing their honored guest pain and grief. He then asks Odysseus to tell them who he is and why he cries whenever the bard sings of the Trojan War. He says, "The gods devised and measured out this devastation to make a song for those in times to come," and asks if perhaps Odysseus lost someone at Troy, a friend, a family member. He asks for his name and his history, and to tell them where his home is so that their magical ships, which can fly as fast as thought and can steer themselves, can carry him safely home at last. He also mentions that his father had told him that Poseidon hates it when the Phaeacians use their ships to take their guests across the sea, and that one day one of their ships would suffer a terrible shipwreck when returning from such a voyage, and a giant mountain would rise from the sea and block their island home from sight, which, bit of a sidetrack, but okay. Then the king goes on to tell Odysseus all of these things, and then he goes quiet as everyone waits for Odysseus' answer. And that is where the chapter ends, on a fantastic cliffhanger. So join us next time to find out what Odysseus says in Book 9. See you guys there.